Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the weekly installment of the Reserve List Top 10. These are the hottest selling cards on the Reserve List January 18th to the 25th of 2025. Now, in today's video, we've got some rather unusual sales on the Reserve List, and the numbers just keep going up. Stay tuned, you don't want to miss out. So where do you start when we're taking a look at the reserve list? Is it utility? Is it artwork? Is it some kind of mix in between? Well, it is all of that and more because the reserve list is a very limited space to play in, and a lot of these cards will continue to go up in value over time. So as we take a look at this top 10, don't forget I'm your host, MTG Moxman. I want to thank you guys for coming and sticking around with me today. Now, if you find cards you like, don't forget to use my link found in the description of this video for my TCG player. Now let's dive into number 10, which is Elephant Graveyard from Arabian Nights. It had 30 sales this week, which is a very unusual amount, and it looks like that's on the heels of Aether Drift and a lot of the Loxodons and Mammoths we've seen since Foundations. Now, this card is averaging $212.49 a copy, over $6,000 of total sales action, and when we look at this card, though, it's been losing value for months now. It's just keeps trending down. Nobody's really buying the card, nor has there been any interest in picking this card up. So what does it do and why is it even remotely important? Well, it taps to add a colorless mana to your mana pool, but it can regenerate either a Mammoth or, in this case, Elephants, Loxodons, and the like, not forgetting Shapeshifters and Changelings. This card actually is a lot better than people realize, and when you add it in with some other spice, well, you got a lot to work with. Now, our next card is one we've never forgotten about. This is Urza Saga with Gaia's Cradle. This card is averaging $859.99. Well, the 32 copies that sold this week was $27,000 plus of sales action, and the copies that are selling do not include anything from the World Championship Series. This is only from Urza Saga in this case, and it's something to pay attention to. That's a lot of money moving in the market space. We saw this last week with cards like Wheel of Fortune, and we're going to continue to see it with cards like this as players kind of move into this market space. It looks like we've had a little bit of cash infusion in the reserve list lately. We've seen this uptrend in a lot of the sales of these cards, and it is resulting in a slight uptick in the overall market value of these cards. It may be small, it may be incremental, but it just continually keeps happening now. There's a lot of imitations of cards like the Gaia's Cradle here, a lot of Wizards' attempts to recreate it, but nothing's as good as the original, and players know that, which is why they go out and buy it. Now, our next card is an epic, iconic card, and that is Lake of the Dead. It was on the list last week, and it hangs in there this week. Now, the reason I'm showing you this card isn't just because it had over 40 sales, which is $3,400 of sales action this week. It's because it keeps selling. 40 sales plus, it had 50, 60, 70, 80. It's had hundreds of sales this year, and that's because the price was so low. Now, if we look last week, it actually had an increase in price. You can see there the $87.57, but here's what gets interesting about this card is when we take a look at the previous week compared to this week, it's actually trending down in value. Even though it had 40 sales, it's only $85 this week. We have an actual drop in the market value. It's not at 87 now, it's at 85. And you can find heavily played copies for $50 on TCG Player. So what are we getting for our value? Well, let's not forget this thing will be played in a lot of Tron decks, Eldrazi, a lot of big bad boys, plus there's lots of ways of duplicating and doubling that mana over by multiple untaps and regurgitation from your graveyard to bring those lands back. Now let's go ahead and again take a look at alliances for Sevi Excavations, another card that's had continual sales action the last couple of weeks, another 40 sales, which puts it a tie for Lake of the Dead, but I had to put them in some kind of order. It's only $400 though that sold this week. It's only an $11 card. It's not expensive. The highest it's been is $45 and change, and now we have it all the way down. It's lost 75% of its value. Now the interesting thing again is you can see here when you look at the market, the monthly change, this one here says it went up 21 cents. Okay, that's kind of interesting. It's a little tiny pittance of an amount, not even a quarter, and it just slowly sits there. But when we look again at today's value, you'll notice it went up 23 cents, just a couple of pennies more, even though the average price stays the same. There is a bit of a change in the market space. We see an increase in sales and a lowering of the stock on the market. Now, this is a card that us here on the channel have continually manipulated. We've done things with this to see what will happen. And I'll tell you right now, the market depth for this card is actually very shallow. It can't take a big hit. Now, our next card is again from Urza Saga, and we're taking a look at Sanctum. I mentioned this last weekend because although it didn't make the list, this card's been hit a lot. It's had a few hundred sales in the last 4 weeks, and it just can't keep taking the beatings. It is increasing in value, 43 sales this week, $11,000 in sales action, and there's a real shortfall in what people believe this card will do versus the reality. Time will tell where the card ends up in 5 years from now, but most players are not willing to take the chance, which is why you're seeing a bell curve in value. You can see it slowly trending back up to above the $300 mark, and that trend will continue if people keep buying it without letting any new stock come to market. Being able to tap for a mana for each enchantment you have in play, and the variety of enchantments we get nowadays, Valgoth's Lair, you have enchantment artifacts like the Spirit Heliod. There's a lot going on in the distant future for cards like this. You can't ignore them. Now, here is a shocker this week. This is copy artifact, but I want to explain to you, this is the unlimited edition. I am showing you the unlimited, not revised. 52 sales at $287.30 is $14,924 of sales action. That's right, this is confirmed. It is a big one. I've even included a clip here on the TCG player where most of these sales occurred. Now, I've checked randomly with a lot of my stores that do have copies of this in. Those copies did not sell other than 1 or 2 random ones, not from the same buyer. The buyer did reach out, though, and let me know, which is just epic. Now, I can't believe we had this many sales of a card like this. I can't wait to get the follow-up email. This is just amazing to see a reserve list card, but also an unlimited version of this card, the bold, dark color of this card coming around again. Copy Artifact is an underrated card, and if the market, and when a market turns around, it's going to be scary. Now, our next card, Helm of Obedience from Alliances. This card, again, is going up in value month over month. We have a couple of viewings here, 63 sales again, which is $2,093 of total sales action. It is trending up again. We've had a lot of sales last week. We have a continuation of those sales this week. And although I didn't get all the calls in on this card, I got as many as I could gather before the start of this video. So it may have actually moved up even further, but for the moment where I had it, I couldn't put it any higher. These are the only confirmed sales I could lock in at the time of the video recording. $33.75 is the average price for this card right now. But if you look, you can see here the $33.23. It's so close, it's right there, guys. Epic to see this card back on the menu again, and the fact that this thing puts things into their graveyard and gives you a creature when you hit one is a very big, valuable card. And this was an all-time great when we were kids. Playing with this thing as a teenager, you were brutalizing people's decks, especially people who didn't play with creatures. Now, our next card is City of Solitude from Visions, comes in at $12.25 per average copy, and you can see the 74 sales this week is only $906.50. We don't have a major movement in the market. We're not having major price shifts on the card, but people are still seeking cards like this out because they do a lot of multi-functioning. They act as enchantments, they're low casting costs, they can be splashed into multiple decks, and they make sure that you can mess up your opponent. Now, the $12.25 you can see here, the card's been trending down from that $75 high, which means this thing has lost so much value, you almost can't lose at this point buying a card this cheap, which is why players are seeking it out, I think. It also has some good playability in multiple commander decks. Now, each player may play spells and abilities only on his or her turn is an epic turnaround card when you want to mess with people. You don't want them countering your spells? Well, now they can't do anything about it, and that's just awesome. But another shocker in this week's list is Demonic Hordes hanging in there. The sales continued this week. It's actually gone up in price. You can see here, 76 sales, $486 of total sales action, and an average price of $6.40. Now, I didn't expect this card to be here again in a second week. Usually cards like this have an interest spike for whatever reason, and they drop off the market, they disappear. Same as Fastball didn't make the list this week. This kind of thing comes and goes in little bits of waves whenever it drops low enough. But you can see here that $6.31 versus the $6.40 we have now means we have a bit of a price shift of like 9 cents week over week of a change in price, which means the sales this card is getting, the 60-70 sales, is translating into a very slight 1 or 2% increase in the overall price on the market, which means it will take thousands of copies to disappear to make this thing actually go up a few dollars, like 10, 20, 30 bucks. Thousands of copies have got to go, and that's not going to happen right now. Now, here's our number one card this week. It is Scorched Ruins from Weatherlight. This card comes in at $60.80, and it sold 86 copies this week, or $5,228. Now, this thing has been as high as around the $90 mark, so this thing's actually trending upward as well. That's on Eldrazi decks using Atrocity, etc. Goes along with Winding Canyons and the like. The abilities of cards like this can really mess people up. And when players see them this low, players are going to dive into the market, pick these cards up on the low, hold on to them, even if it's a heavily played copy, which you can find for like 50 bucks. It makes a lot of sense for players to utilize these cards, but also take advantage of low pricing. Here in Canada, cards like this go for like $80, $90, but with no tax and actually discounts from retailers, we're seeing a lot more local sales as well as cards like this. That when it comes into play, you got to sacrifice 2 untap lands, but it taps for 4 colorless. There's so many ways of getting lands back. That's not really a minus now when you're playing Commander, so keep it in mind, everyone. So here we are at the end of the video, and before you guys leave me today, we have a few things to cover that are happening in the market of reserve list cards for Magic the Gathering. Number one, let's talk about Elephant Graveyard. Now, this card had 20,700 copies that were printed. That's all that ever existed. When you move even 30 copies, you're moving 1.4% of the entire print run that ever existed. Moving 30 copies does not happen. It does not happen for this card. So somebody consolidated some positions in this card. Some people bought up multiple copies. They use things like TCG Player, eBay, and local stores to grab these things. Because they're so cheap, some of these people bought them for under $100. Under $100. And when you realize how many times this card can be utilized, it fits into any deck that's playing with elephants or loxodons. There's a lot more going on there, not to mention shapeshifters and changelings and where things may go. Just like other things like didgeridoo and these chances for tribal themes, the idea of Elephant Graveyard being less than $500 is almost insulting, but that's the way it's played out. So remember, 30 copies is around 1.4% of the entire market that ever existed for this card. How many are really left is pretty hard to tell, so it probably could be as much as like 10%. Could be as much as that. 10% of the market just moved. It is very hard to pinpoint down the card numbers on this card, so keep an eye out, guys. It's insane to think that. Now, as we go along here, I want to mention something. We had other cards that didn't make the list, like Fast Bond came in just underneath, like 28 copies. We had Savannah at 28 copies, Underground Sea 23 copies. We had a lot of these heavier cards, especially like things like Underground Sea, that sold multiple copies, which is still $20,000, $30,000 in actual sales volumes that just don't make the list because we're going by volume of sales in totality. Other cards like Jester's Mask totally dropped off the earth this week. Not even considered. They're just gone. Candelabra of Tanos, by the way, 7 more copies sold. Most of those were a local dealer that I dealt with, and they let me know they moved. They didn't tell me who or where or why, but I do get to know and see the confirmed sales, so that happened too. That's more than meets the eye, as they say. It's just a little bit different to see the market moving. And what gets me is this consolidation of sales. I don't like the idea that when you have these kind of sales happen, they could just be going to a collection and disappearing. They could be going to players. But when you have 4 or 5 disappearing under the same umbrella at the same time, chances are that is speculation of a collector buying the card up and just holding on to it, waiting for the market to turn around. When you're seeing prices this low, there's a lot of people who are willing to take a stab, hold on to the market, and see where things end up. Even if it's just a wild ride of speculation, they have fun doing it, and they have the funds to do so. Other cards we see continually being bought and sold in the reserve list, things like Grim Monolith, even Gaia's Cradle. Those ones are regular cards I'm used to seeing sell back and forth. Sarah's Sanctum's kind of a newer rival to see continual sales like this, and as a card I'm keeping a very close eye on. Yeah, I bought a couple of copies, but it looks like a lot of other people did as well, because when I did my video talking about that last week, I saw all these people email me saying, hey, I bought one too over Christmas time. I used some funds I got, a gift card for TCG Player. I bought this. I use this. So there's a lot going on in this market space that seems kind of quiet, kind of low right now, but really there's a lot more going on than I think we realize under the surface that is the reserve list. Pay attention to this stuff. It's kind of crazy, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you guys say in these comment sections. Don't forget, we have the live stream 6:30 Eastern Standard Time. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys there. Have a great one, guys. Shop smart, shop S-smart. And this reserve list, it's kind of crazy right now. Hey, a big shout out and thank you to the fantastic patrons of my channel. Because of these amazing patrons, daily uploaded content is made possible here for YouTube. So thanks again to those supporters. And you know what? It's a pretty awesome day in the world of Magic the Gathering. We're talking about reserve list cards kicking back. And yes, I did play Magic this weekend. I hope you guys did too, because this is the game, the hobby that we love. See you guys soon. Okay, let's get to this. let's talk about what's really going on. You've made it this far. You made it to the secret back room of the vault. You knew the combination. You dialed in. You said, ramble, jamble, and the door just opened. Okay. Now, a few things of note. Elephant Graveyard should not be selling the copies that it sold, but then again, the price should not be as low as it is. When I saw those, I guess, mammoths, loxodons, all those kind of guys appear inside, even the ooze that makes the elephants, when you saw all that stuff appear inside of Aether Drift, just a smattering, somebody's going to think, well, what goes along with elephants? How many elephants are there? What types do we have to deal with? And then they go and they look up and they say, hey, Elephant Graveyard's a pretty good card. How much is that card now? Wow, look how cheap it is. And they buy it. Gaia's Cradle, very surprised to see that on the list. Very surprised. Not the card I would have expected. Maybe Volross Stronghold or something coming around again as the price slowly dips down, but no. Even Tolarian Academy, 18 copies sold this week. Not going to make the list, though. It's not hot enough of a topic right now to make it in there. But either way, I wonder how many people forgot the reserve list exists right now. With all these new flashy Edgar Markov style cards, a lot of attention gets drawn away to that almost Pokemon collectability. And there are players who look at the utilitarian purpose of the Magic cards. The writing on the card matters. But not everyone uses it. Not everyone thinks about it the way they should. Because you can have a really cool looking guy, but if you can regenerate something and stop it from dying in the first place, well, you get a lot more deadly. And if you can buy it for a bargain basement price of half of what some of these cards cost, these new flashy versions, yeah, people are going to take advantage of that sooner or later. Anyway, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for being here. I got some chicken and potatoes I'm cooking right now upstairs, and I got to get back to it. But they sure are smelling good. Yeah, the Moxman is quite the cook. What, you want some of my food? Can't have my food right now. None for you. It isn't like we have Wonka vision where you can like reach into the TV and like pull it out. We haven't gotten there yet. Teleportation. Poor Mike TV.